I played over 50 hours of board games in January, and now I'm excited to talk about them. Hello and welcome to Nelson All Over. I'm Nelson, and today we're talking about my first January monthly recap. And so what these videos are aimed to do is to open a conversation about what I played the previous month, this month being January, kind of where I stand on some of my board game resolutions, and then also probably just talking about some topics. We are also going to have a game of the month that we are going to talk about. This game is Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig. If you're curious about any of this stuff, there's always going to be chapters, so you can jump to whatever interests you the most. Please feel free to do that. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about in my whole resolutions of board gaming is that I think I kind of undershot my 400 plays for the year number. I'm sitting at 60 after 31 days. So I think I'm going to blow that one out of the water. I may need to reevaluate, but it looks like it's probably going to be closer to 500-600. Yeah, so it's a little more. I think I play a lot more Marvel Champions and like the Lord of the Rings and Arkham Horror than I realized, and so that probably skewed these numbers pretty significantly. And I just wasn't keeping track of that last year, and so when I thought, hey, I may have played, 200 games, I think it was closer to like 400. With that being said, my most played game in January was Marvel Champions with 31 plays, totaling around 19 hours of gameplay. Now, most, if not all of these games were streamed. I'm actually trying to think if I played any games not streamed in January. I don't know if I did. I did with Lord of the Rings and Arkham, but I don't think I played any outside of Marvel, or any outside my streaming with Marvel. But it was a pretty big month with me coming up on vacation, and so I wanted to stream as many heroes as I possibly could so that I still had content for my cards channel while I was out and not able to stream. With the Marvel Champions game, a lot of plays on that one. That will be probably the most played. If you are interested in more Marvel Champions, Lord of the Rings, Arkham horror card games, there's a link down below for a whole nother YouTube channel all about card games. I talk way more about that stuff over there, and I try and focus this channel a little bit more on board games. But I did play, let's see, Lord of the Rings. I played 12 times for 10 hours and Arkham 4 times for 9 hours. So Arkham and Lord of the Rings a little bit less, but those are also a little bit more involved games. And so Champions, I can just knock out games in like 20 to 40 minutes, whereas Lord of the Rings takes a lot more to set up, and then the Arkham is a little bit more of an experience that I like to not drag out, but experience in less of a quick fashion. So the other board game resolution that I had was that I wanted to have an H index of 10. Currently I'm sitting at 3, and so the H index is how many games you've played that many times. So I've played 3 games at least 3 times. Those are the 3 LCGs. Those were not any that was not going to be any question that I was going to make those games on that H index top 10 list. And I've already, hit 10 plays with 2 of those 3. So the next one that's looking to move into that H index is probably Marvel Dice Throne. I had 2 plays of that, or Dice Throne in general. I had 2 plays of that, and probably want to start getting more into that. I am looking at trying to trade for Dice Throne Adventures. So if you know anything about DTA or are curious about me playing it, let me know, because that feels like something I want to dive into. It feels like a really cool system, and I like Dice Throne, but the head-to-head nature I don't get to play a lot of, and so like a cooperative storytelling experience could be a lot of fun. I would enjoy that. I played 7 Wonders two-handed with my wife. So this was actually a lot of fun. This was probably one of the highlights of the month for me, is that my wife and I played 2-player 7 Wonders, but we each controlled 2 wonders. And you never passed to yourself, and you were sitting adjacent to the other people, or the other people's controlled wonders. And so there was a lot of kind of interesting decisions, right? Because you would pass across the table or directly across the table, and so it helped me kind of think about what cards were going to come back, and also if there were cards that I thought I would be able to get back after like a couple of different passes. It was a 4-player game, and so you did get to see your hand multiple times, and so it was fun to make that decision, and allowed me to approach the game a little bit differently, which was interesting, right? Because I was able to kind of map out and easily see it's like that player, and that player probably don't want this card, so I could probably be pretty safe in not drafting it and hoping that it comes back. So Seven Wonders was a lot of fun. We had a couple plays of that. And then the last resolution that I had for 2023 was that I wanted to decrease my shelf of shame by at least one every single month. I did not want it to stagnate or increase, and I was able to do that. I did play the game of the month that I'm talking about, and that's going to be Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig. So this is kind of the successor to Between Two Cities, as well as Castles of Mad King Ludwig, kind of combined. Stonemaier did a really good job of producing this game. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. I wanted to talk about a couple more things before we get into that game of the month. All in all, it really wasn't a huge board gaming month for me outside of the LCGs. I played 13 different games. So 13 total different games. And most of those were only like one plays and then the couple outliers. I played like Role Player, and I think that one's gonna make it onto my trade list. I enjoy Role Player, but with the time that Role Player actually takes to play, it feels like there are just so many more games that I would like to play with that, or play in that time. And I think I kind of want Sagrada back. I traded Sagrada after I got Role Player, and those games are compared so very frequently because it's dice drafting, dice placement, kind of in a puzzle system, and I feel like Sagrada is a little bit more elegant. I like Role Player, but I have so many games that are competing for that time spot, that complexity era, and I just don't know if Role Player is going to get back to the table. It just, while we were playing it, it's like, yeah, this is fun, but I don't know. We'll see. Any other games that I played that I think I'm going to trade? No. I think that we did have a lot of... I did have a game that technically did make it off the shelf of shame in December. It was New Year's Eve. We played Sushi Go Party, and so that game got knocked off the shelf of shame. And then we played it again in January. And so if I had held out just a few hours, I feel like I would have gotten 2 off the shelf of shame. But that was fine. Twilight Inscription, played that. 2-player, it worked pretty well, 2-player. I thought I've played it a couple of times with multiplayer. In 2-player, there's a couple of different rules. And I actually think I may like it better, 2-player. There's a AI system that whenever you roll dice in Twilight Inscription, you roll the 3 normal dice, and then there's focus dice that you can unlock on different sheets. Twilight Inscription is 4 different sheets. It's a huge rolling, right? And with the AI, whenever you roll those dice, the focus die determine what the AI does. So they're competing for military, they're competing for votes, they're competing for the 4 different. I don't even remember what they're called. The 4 different objectives, I think they're called, and then they're racing towards Mechatol Rex. So based on what's rolled on those focus dice determines how it progresses along those tracks. It feels like the scores are going to be more normalized in a 2-player game, because in a multiplayer game it feels like, and this is not a bad thing, it's just a difference, right? That depending on how you are playing with your neighbors, if you're sitting next to someone who's heavily investing into military, then you also have to heavily invest into military. And if that's happening on both sides, that distracts from the other couple areas on the sheet, and military and votes are kind of the things that people are competing over in that game. Otherwise, it's a fairly solitaire game. And so with having a set number for the AI, I feel like you at least had a target value to shoot for. And so I really appreciated that. I thought the 2-player version was really good. I'll try the solo play. That may be something I would stream. That seems like a fun stream, actually. Yeah. I'll have to do that. I'll have to stream Twilight Inscription. But yeah, I really enjoyed Twilight Inscription. It was my wife's first time playing, and she really enjoyed it, so I'm excited to play some more of that. And anything else I wanted to talk about? I played Arc Nova on TTS. That was nice. The Arc Nova TTS mod was really good. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to talk about before we dive into the game of the year. Viticulture World, excellent. We played 2 scenarios of that. I kind of want and hope that Viticulture World makes it onto my H-Index 10, because I am falling in love with that game. That expansion, it's a cooperative expansion to Viticulture. I've talked about it in a couple of videos, but it is so phenomenal. They did an excellent job of taking the mechanics that are and what makes Viticulture and putting it into a cooperative setting. And I love cooperative games. And so Viticulture World is top tier for me. I mean, it's one of my favorite expansions of all time. I don't know if it's one of the best expansions of all time, but it's one of my most enjoyed expansions of all time, just because it took a experience that I already enjoyed and then took it to the next level into a cooperative setting, and it's just a really fun puzzle. But yeah, well, let's talk about Between Two Castles. Let's talk about Between Two Castles, which is going to be the game of the month. Full disclosure, this game was sent to me to review by Stonemaier Games. So with that in mind, let's talk about it. This is a game that was published in 2018. It's by Stonemaier Games, and it is designed by Matthew O'Malley and Ben Rosette. And this game is the sequel, or kind of like I just had the vision of like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Fusion card. Like you fuse Between Two Cities and Castles of Mad King Ludwig. I've played both of those games. I love Between Two Cities. Castles of Mad King Ludwig, it was okay. I want to play it again. It was not the right setting when I played it. I've only played it once, and so I really want to try it one more, or at least one more time, and see how I like it again. But the first time I did, it would just, I don't think it was the game. I think it was the setting that put me off of it. But Between Two Castles, actually, let's start with Between Two Cities. So Between Two Cities is a game I've talked about a couple of times on this channel before. I think it's one of the best games you can play with a new player, bringing them into the world of board games. It's a great game where you're playing with people on your left and your right. If you have a new player, put them in between two veteran players, and they can help out because there's a drafting system and you're building a 4x4 grid of cities that score over the different suits. So it's kind of a set collection placement bonus type game. Between Two Castles is very similar to that. Castles of Mad King Ludwig is a bidding game. I don't know a lot about this game because it was a while ago that I played it, but it's like a bidding game where you're building a crazy castle. And so the combination of these two games, I think, worked really, really well, right? So you have the same kind of mechanics where it's a tile drafting game and you're building a castle with the player on your left and the player on your right. And then the difference in Between Two Castles and Between Two Cities is Between Two Castles does not have a footprint restriction, right? Between Two Cities is a 4x4 grid. It's very symmetrical. You kind of know and need to plan around this. Between Two Castles, you can have the craziest looking castle possible. You can go up 12 tiles, you can go out to the side. There's very little restrictions on what can be placed where. Like there are certain tiles that can only be placed above your throne room, which is like your starting tile. There are certain tiles that can only be placed below. There are tiles that are like outdoors, so nothing can go on top of them. You can't have like balconies, like things can't overhang. So like there are some restrictions on what you can place, but the castles end up looking completely unique. And every single tile scores differently. So you will have tiles that score based on what they're next to, based on what type of room they're next to, or based on what type of like wall ornament is hanging in that room. Or it could just score based on what is in your castle. So there, like the gardens score if you have sleeping rooms in your castle. Sleeping rooms score if you have everything else in your castle. And so there are just a lot of ways to score the game. There's also added complexity because once you place your third type of any room, you get to get a specific bonus based on that room's type. And so those could be bonus scoring cards, additional tiles, specialty tiles, new ways to score. And so what I liked about Between Two Cities is not necessarily present in Between Two Castles. However, I do think Between Two Castles is a better game. And what I mean by that is that if I'm looking at it from a pure mechanic standpoint, Between Two Castles is a better game than Between Two Cities. I enjoy Between Two Castles gameplay more than Between Two Cities. However, I think Between Two Cities is a better addition to a collection than Between Two Castles, because Between Two Castles is more meaty. It is more mechanically driven. It's a little bit heavier of a game. And what I liked about Between Two Cities is how inviting it was to new players. I don't think I would play this with new players, like someone who's not played a board game before. There's a lot going on in this game, and it would take a lot to explain it to a new player. Not saying that you can't do it, but Between Two Cities was so simplistic and such an easy introduction into drafting and scoring that if I had to pick one of these, it would be Between Two Cities. Now, I am very happy I have both of them, and if I'm playing with gamer friends, I'm absolutely pulling out Between Two Castles. But if I had to boil it down and pick one of them, I would pick Between Two Cities because I have other games in my collection that compete for that Between Two Castles spot. That being said, very happy I have it. I think it's a really interesting game. I think there's a lot more meat there. It plays in a little bit longer. I think Between Two Cities is around 20 minutes, whereas this is probably around 40 minutes of play. That's about average. I played it about 3 times now. A couple of them were last year. So, but I played my copy this year. So that's why I came off the shelf of shame. So I played a couple of it last year, and I'm really happy with the game. I think that the game is very mechanically sound. The scoring is really interesting. We played it 3-player this last time, which I didn't love. I think it does work out a little bit better at a higher player count, but it's very easily done and very well implemented at 3. I have not tried a 2-player. There is a 2-player variant. I don't think I will ever. It just doesn't seem appealing to me because the thing that draws me in is that interaction with your 2 neighbors, and then like your score is the lower of your 2 castles or cities, and that I think kind of goes away in the 2-player. I'm actually not quite sure how the 2-player is implemented, but the 3-player worked fine, but at a higher player count, like 4 to 6, I think it goes up to 7. Solid, very solid game. So yeah, that's Between Two Castles and the month of January for my board gaming journey, year, whatever we want to call it. But I'm excited. We are doing a little bit of traveling in February, and so we're traveling with a couple of friends, and so I'm excited to take some games, and like they can't be big games, right? I can't take, Twilight, Inscription, or Between Two Castles because it's not necessarily, I don't have room in my luggage for it. But I'm excited to take like some Hanabi, Ghost of Christmas. I'm trying to think of some other ones that are those small box games. Any of the Button Shy games I'm probably going to grab and just throw in like a backpack. And as we're kind of touring around and doing our vacationing, I'm excited to try more of those games. And there are a couple of them that we can get off our shelf of shame. The other kind of goal for February would be to try and get that H index up to maybe like a 4 or a 5, right? I think a role player could get me there. That would put me at a 4. If I played 2 more times of role player, that would put me up to a 4. And then Viticulture World, I would have to play 3 more times and then 3 more times a role player. So, but those kind of look like the top contenders for that H index. I mean, and also I think H index of 10 was a little ambitious, where I undershot my play time or my number of plays. I think I may have overshot my H index because like my entire H index of all time, just from since I've started tracking it, is 14. So I played 14 different games 14 different times, and that is over 3 years of tracking. So 1 year of 10 games will take some dedication, and so I want to be cognizant and intentional about bumping that H index up, because there is something to be said about playing a lot of games, but there's also something to be said about playing the same games multiple times and learning and growing in those games. And so I am excited to try and continue to bump that up. I think that'll be fun to try and get that up. And at some point I need to probably decide on what these 10 games are going to be, and yeah, be intentional about getting them there. But yeah, so that was January. Really happy. Thanks for hanging out. If you enjoyed this content, yeah, we do a lot of board game stuff. I really like board games, so I like talking about them. And if you like board games too, I invite you to subscribe and come on this journey with me. So thanks for hanging out. Hope you have a fantastic February, and I'll see you next time. Peace.